Mal, Go-Go, and him, they're all dead. It's like, thing is, I'm dead too.
What are you talking about? What do you mean, you're dead, too? You hear me? What do you mean? What do you mean you're f***ing dead?
I don't got a future.
Come on, man.
No, it's true, Bo, and honestly, I don't even damn deserve one.
Welcome back to the Murdaugh Death in the Family official podcast. I'm Mandy Matney, creator of the Murdaugh Murders podcast, now known as True Sunlight, which has reported on Stephen Smith's unsolved 2015 homicide since 2021. Today, we're filming in Beaufort, South Carolina, just about a mile from where Mallory Beach lost her life in 2019 and about an hour from where Stephen Smith lost his life in 2015. You'll hear from Stephen's mom, Sandy Smith, later in this episode, and you can hear more from Sandy in the extended audio version wherever you get your podcasts. But first, I want to talk about series co-creator, author, executive producer, documentarian, and director Erin Lee Carr. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Erin Lee Carr, director of Episode 5, which takes on one of the most heartbreaking and unsolved cases connected to the Murdaugh story, the unsolved homicide of Stephen Smith. But more so, Episode 5 looks at Stephen's life in the life of his mother Sandy and his sister Stephanie. If you are familiar with Erin's work, you know that she is one of the most respected documentary filmmakers of our time, with powerful projects on Hulu and other streamers that balance tough truths with deep compassion for victims. In Episode 5, Erin brings that same care and creativity to Stephen's story, not just exploring the unanswered questions around his death in Hampton County, but also who Stephen really was and why his life mattered. So let's dive in. Here is my conversation with Erin Lee Carr, co-director of the series and the creative force behind Episode 5 of Murdaugh Death in the Family. Erin!
Yo,
How are you?
I'm rocking. We are, the show's about to come out, and yeah, I'm so excited.
I am too. This is your first scripted series, correct? So, first question. You have built a career as a documentarian known for telling complicated and riveting true crime stories from Gypsy Rose to Sherry Papini. What drew you into the Murdaugh story back in 2021?
You know, everyone was sending me your reporting saying, "Have you heard of Mandy Matney? Do you know what's going down in the South? This is crazy. This feels like you should do it." I got not one, not five, not 15. I got about 20 texts about it. So I am lucky that I've made so many films for HBO, Netflix, Hulu, and Peacock. And when something scary and terrible happens, people look in their phones and they say, I'm going to contact Erin Lee Carr about this. So I think out of kind of maybe any story that's come out in the last 5 years, I was contacted so much about this one. And, what I like to do and think about is abuses of power and what happens and how these things can be undone. And especially since there was a death of a young woman and ultimately the death of Maggie and Paul, as well as a sort of mysterious death of Gloria Satterfield, there was a lot to think about. And so I just knew I wanted to do something, but I knew that there were a lot of documentary units on the ground. And it's something like I like to call as like a snake pit, right? You don't want to jump into the snake pit, especially you don't want to jump late because you will get bitten. So I just said, I just don't think I'm the right person, even though I am a documentary filmmaker, to tell that story. I think we need to do it as scripted. I want to know what happened inside that house, and we don't have footage that shows that. And so let's think about it, research it for years, and make that.
How was your research process different for this project that's scripted versus all of your documentaries?
Well, for one thing, there was such a wealth of material with your podcast. And I remember I was living in DC at the time, and I would just kind of be going about my daily life and just listening to you and listening to you and listening to you and understanding, because you were making it as the case was unfolding. And so it's very rare that you get that kind of real time access to something that's happening. And some of it was just like complete unknowns. We were we were not sure for a long time if Alex Murdaugh was going to get charged for what we thought he did. And so it was incredible to have this sort of wealth of material that showed what it looked like at every moment. We started making this before the trial happened. And so we were so obsessed with this. And even if there would have been a plea deal or anything like that, there was enough to make it. So it was the most incredible, crazy research process. I wanted to know everything about everything so that I could work with the showrunner, Michael D. Fuller, who is the co creator of the show, but really the beating heart of the show. And I would say, you don't need me for a lot of the scripted stuff. You've been doing this for a really long time, but I want to know almost everything about this in order to supply you with the details so that we can get it as accurate as humanly possible. So for the people out there that know everything, no, I'm going to do cherries for them. Like to get that even the most diehard of people, they will be like, I can't believe they did that just like it happened. And so research, even though it's not like the sexiest of roles, that's really what I felt like I could really take on and help in the process.
Okay, so Erin, when we get to episode 5 and dive deeper into the Stephen Smith case, the tone shifts. There's mystery, there's grief, and there's a lot of unanswered questions. How did you approach structuring this episode to both respect to Stephen's memory and also build narrative tension for audiences who might not know the story yet?
The Stephen Smith story was and is really important to me personally. As a queer person that got to grow up in the North, I really did not have the same set of really systemic issues that a person like Stephen faced. And so Stephen Smith was part of this. And if we look at the South and the world that the Murdaughs created, being a minority, whether it be a person of color or a different sort of sexual identity or as a trans person, that world is pretty difficult to live in. And Stephen was a really happy guy. Like, I love that he lived his life out. He was not secretive. And so when it came to his name being connected to this family, either through rumor or something else, we knew he had to be a part of it. And we knew that we wanted him to see him living his life, going to a party, looking at him in his bedroom. And so I felt like it was honor. And I got to work with Alana, the writer on the episode. And we just knew we wanted to start with it, right? We didn't want to do Stephen's death. We wanted to do him in life and the things that he faced. So that was a huge motivating part of how we structured the episode.
I got very emotional when I saw Stephen's room. You guys worked so hard to create just this world that he would have loved and enjoyed. Everything from you guys picked out individual books and movies for the shelves. What was that process like?
We were enormously fortunate to work with some of the best set decorators and dressers that this that we have in the industry. Working with Amy and her team, this was the type of person that Stephen was, and he lived in like he loved fantasy books, and every single detail that you or Sandy Smith told us, we wanted the room to be a part of who he was. So when I walked into the room for the first time and I saw all these different like quotes and different things and the lights and the pride aspect of it, yeah, like it melted me. And then I even got to have that when I got to walk in with you and David. And, if there's anybody that has been a solid and consistent presence for Sandy Smith and for Stephen, it is the both of you and Liz. And so we needed to honor all that you've done, but make sure that we don't just think about him as a body. We think about him as a living, breathing person that was taken from us.
And his story represents the power, like you said, the power structure that is so important for people to understand. People like the Smith family, and especially people like Stephen who are gay, just get left behind and forgotten often. And it was very important. I appreciated how important it was to you guys to tell that story. And everyone on set was just, it was just an emotional experience. I feel like being on all of the episode 5 Steven sets, because everybody was so into, like, everyone legitimately loved who Steven was. And I can't wait for Sandy to see it. What hit me hardest during the interview was Erin's description of walking into the recreated set of Stephen Smith's bedroom. Every book, every light, every piece was chosen to reflect who Stephen was in life, not just who he became in death. That moment underscored why this show is so different. It doesn't just dramatize crime, it humanizes the people at its center. For me, Stephen's case has always symbolized what happens when powerful systems fail vulnerable people. Hearing Erin talk about her responsibility as a queer filmmaker also added a layer of complexity. This episode isn't just about a murder mystery. It's about identity, resilience, and demanding justice for those forgotten. One of your specialties is centering the humanity of real people in true crime stories. With Stephen Smith, what were the specific challenges in making sure that his life, not just his tragedy, came through in what the series depicted?
It's a really good question. I think that the majority of the information I had about Stephen was about his death. And so it really was when Michael and I were able to speak with Sandy Smith, who you've built such a long-standing relationship with, we just got to know so much more when it comes to his laugh and what he cared about, his relationship with his sister Stephanie, his relationship with his friends. What is it like to be a queer person in the South? Seeing his fabulous selfies, looking at what he was doing with his life, how, he really cared about who he was going to become. And so it was all these conversations that led to us putting in as much about him as possible. And, if I had my druthers, he would have been half the episode. I have to remember that the show is about the Murdaughs, and ultimately, you'll see how this show feels about what happened to Stephen and the Murdaughs' involvement. But also, what we got to do was really spend time with Sandy on screen. And when I got to meet Rhoda, who was going to play Sandy Smith, and it was just incredible. She embodied who Sandy is in her humor, in her wit, in her sort of like raspiness. And, I love a lot of things, but I love my kids the most. And directing, it was still scary. And I remember Rhoda, which was, I think, a very Sandy Smith thing. You did great today. And I said, thanks, Mom. I needed that one. And so we all sometimes just want a mom like Sandy Smith to tell us we're doing a good job. But yeah, it was really important that we don't see, Murdaugh's body count. All these people died. They left us and they left their families. And it is our job to make sure that the loss of these people are not forgotten. And
Yeah.
I really feel that way about Maggie and Paul as well.
Absolutely. Just one comment. I swear Rhoda's hugs felt exactly like Sandy Smith's. She just had this presence, this positivity and sweetness, and like you said, motherly. I was like, how did they find this person that is like her twin in both spirit and looks like her? You guys did an amazing job with casting, and we could talk about that for a really long time, but you played a huge role in the casting, correct?
Yes.
I just want to say great job.
Michael, number one, he's the quarterback of everything. I love that guy. And the casting department at Hulu and UCP brought their A game. But I might have been involved in a couple of key roles of people that I really wanted for these strong female characters.
It's no secret, I am a strong feminist too, and shocking. One thing on set that I noticed is how many women we had in leadership roles throughout the series. How do you think that that made a difference in the way that the series is
I mean,
portrayed?
I just do want to give credit to Michael D. Fuller, who was like, women in, women first. He. I think a lot of people would want to stack the team from dudes from the South, right? And Michael really wanted different people with different experiences, and our writers' room was split, if not more women than men, which I thought was so incredible. Yeah, I think that being around women in set situations, I think there is more nurturing. I think there is more caring. I think there is discussion about like what is this looking like, how people are doing, checking in. Yeah, I primarily work with women, so it was very typical for me. But when you think the Murdaugh show, you would think it was made by all men, and it's not true. And I hope that audiences feel some of that really careful thoughtfulness. You don't need to be a woman to do that. I think Michael did that quite well. But yeah, like we wanted to really think about how this show was made because it's so masculine. There's so much toxic masculinity, and you need to come from a place of understanding toxic masculinity to put that in the show and have it be visible, relatable, interesting.
And speaking of that, Buster was portrayed throughout the series in a way that was never really portrayed of him ever, and that's with empathy and with depth. Why did you and Michael take that route with Buster?
I often try to think about the day after Buster's personal experience of where he was notified the night before that his mother and brother were killed. I think there are few people on earth that knows what that feels like. And Buster grew up in a family where certain things were done a certain way. And so understanding the picture because we are years out, Maggie and Paul were murdered in 2021. We're in 2025 as we record this. We just have to think about what that must have felt like and how everything changed. And so it behooves us while we make a show that is about true crime and about all these things. It's important to remember that he lost people and that, we as the filmmakers cannot ever forget that that's what actually happened here. We are always very clear on this happened to real people. And we hope the show is extremely reflective of that.
I was starstruck at the moment I met ELC in August of 2021 to discuss a potential collaboration. Over the last 4 years, that collaboration blossomed into a meaningful friendship as we partnered to bring the Murdaugh Death in the Family script, production, and release to life. Erin and I share an understanding of grief and loss while employing an impressive ability to be resilient in the face of internal and external challenges, especially when dismantling the patriarchy is concerned. It has truly been an honor to work alongside such a visionary talent.
We unfortunately lost a very big part of our Murdaugh family. The script supervisor, Amy, died recently. And now, when you think about these big experiences of your life making these shows with this family, and it is a family, just how someone can be gone within seconds. And so I think we're all thinking about that, about what we get to do with our lives and how beautiful it is, but how it can be gone so quickly.
And Amy was the heart and soul on set. And I feel like it also made her death, unfortunately, made everybody closer. The Smith case is unsolved, which means there are so many unknowns. How did you decide what could be dramatized versus what needed to be left open-ended?
I think the big thing is we don't know who killed Stephen Smith, as you famously put. And up until this day, we don't know. And so we were able to have part of the police file and to talk to some of the primary players. We knew that we couldn't implicate anyone in the death of Stephen Smith. And the research and the people that we spoke to indicated that if there had been a more solid tie in between Buster Murdaugh and Stephen, it would have been found out. So we took the stance that Buster was not involved in the death of Stephen Smith.
I got some news of my own. Turns out Buster having something to do with Stephen is nothing but rumors.
What?
Where did you hear that?
I just got a call from a classmate of Buster and Stevens, who Buster used to pick on. Called the cops anonymously when Steven died and laid blame on Buster just to get back at him.
Do you really believe them?
I do. You know how small towns go. Somebody has a grudge and then they say, well, I heard such and such about so-and-so, and then next thing you know, somebody else heard something even worse, and then on and until it has a great big old life of its own.
From episode 5, what scenes or script moments were the hardest to write and bring to life?
Well, Alana wrote it, who is the absolute best and is one of my favorite people in the entire world. And she'll sort of speak on it. But man, the whole thing is tough. Writing television shows is tough. Watching people write television shows is tough. Directing these incredible actors. It's not like, oh, you stay awake every night at 4 a.m. and say, am I good enough to do this? No, that wasn't me. It totally was me. The whole thing was tough. I mean, nothing sort of came easy. I think if you'll watch the episode, there's a lot of exteriors. A lot of it takes place outside. And there's this big watermelon festival. And I'm an accomplished documentary filmmaker. I can interview anyone. But when you're like, you need to direct 200 people doing watermelon things while all this stuff is happening, there's a giant float, there's a fight. I mean, I had to use every ounce of intelligence I ever had. So I'm going to just do a cop out and say absolutely everything was hard. And it was a race against the clock every day because I'm not going to be a first-time director that goes over. You can't go over on your day. You have a certain number of hours to get it. And when you go over as a first-time director, it is a mark against you. And this show would have, had I really needed to have extra time in these big Maggie and Alex scenes, obviously it would have been given. But I'm an Irish nut job that just needs to get my work done so I can go eat some potatoes. I just wanted to do as good of a job as possible, but then at the end of the day say I did it, so it just was hard, but there's a reason why these jobs are hard.
I'll be honest, when I first connected with Erin back in 2021, I was intimidated. She had already made some of the most impactful true crime documentaries of our time. But what I quickly learned is that Erin doesn't just use her success to dominate a project. She uses it to lift people up. She listens closely. She asks tough questions. And she really respected the years that Liz and I had already put into the story. Seeing how she worked with Michael D. Fuller, the writers and the actors, to shape Steven's episode reminded me that the best stories are told by teams who balance truth, compassion, and creativity. The Watermelon Festival was quite the... It was a huge production. It was a huge...
I think it was one of the biggest set pieces of the entire show. And when you're shooting in Atlanta, who has notoriously fickle weather conditions, what if it had rained that day? We would have been SOL, one of the things that you and I discussed is why the Watermelon Festival, right? But when you're making a TV show, even a reality show, a documentary, you want to have a scene where all the characters converge. Famously in reality television show with the housewives, they're always doing those dinners where everything goes down, or the party, or things like that. And so we knew we wanted to do our version of that, which was the Hampton Watermelon Festival, beloved by many. And who doesn't love watermelon? I did get to eat some really fresh watermelon. There was, thousands of watermelon purchased for that event. And our production designer, Dave Blass, just really brought the heat when it came to that, and making the float, doing all these things. And so, if you have 2 sticks in a watermelon and say it's the Hampton Watermelon Festival, people are why am I watching this TV show? They didn't put enough effort in. And so we knew we wanted to have a place where Alex was running into all the people he didn't want to run into. And, Paul was playing these games and, being really isolated from his friend group. And who knows what was happening with Buster. And Maggie was dealing with, does she actually want to continue doing everything possible for this family? Or does she want to sort of recede into her own life? So I was so psyched that I got the Watermelon Festival episode, really the Stephen Smith episode. But that was one of the biggest days of my life, 2 days of my life shooting that.
Yeah, and while all of that was going on, Randolph was being honored and was the king of the parade, and I thought that was
Pretty tone deaf.
pretty tough, but the true.
real
Pretty-
life that
Pretty
happens.
really, yeah. It's like the top of their family is all celebratory and great, and everything else is falling apart beneath it. After episode 5 airs, what do you hope that audience members come away with?
I'm gonna be really annoying, and I say I put it all out there on the field, and I want you to feel how you feel in watching that episode. I never try to place expectations on it. I think the only thing I'll say is, what happened to that family?
Yeah.
What comes next? And we are an episode before a really dangerous, scary thing happens in the next episode. And so it's really important that you feel like all the dark forces are converging for something terrible to happen. And so, yeah, I think you're going to think what you want, but I guess always remember that these people are real people.
We've talked about this at length before too, but the hope too that this gets people talking about Stephen Smith again is important to not only me and David, but to everyone on set. Everyone wants Stephen's case to be solved, and I do believe that this could do it. You never know.
There's been no tireless advocate like you guys to do that. And I believe in my heart, just like we saw with the Gone Girls case, the Long Island serial killer, or other cases that happen, if you keep fighting for these things and caring about it and pushing it, justice will come. And one of my great hopes is that justice happens and Sandy Smith knows what happened to her son. That is what every mother deserves. And I think it's going to happen.
I do too. We just have to hold that hope. Stephen Smith was just 19 years old when he was killed in 2015 under circumstances that remain suspicious to this day. He was a bright, kind, and ambitious young man, full of life and dreams of becoming a nurse. But instead of answers, Sandy was met with silence, indifference, and a system that seemed more intent on protecting the powerful than seeking the truth. For nearly a decade, Sandy has carried the weight of not only losing her son, but also fighting to make sure that her story is not forgotten. She has knocked on doors, demanded accountability, and refused to let the whispers surrounding Stephen's death fade away. Without her persistence and the courage to keep pushing when it felt like no one was listening, Stephen's case may have never gained the national attention that it deserves today. I am honored to share a little of my conversation with Sandy Smith, to share her perspective, her memories of Stephen, and her continued fight for justice. What do you want audiences to take away after watching episode 5, both about Stephen's story and about the broader fight for justice from you guys and people like Stephen in South Carolina?
Well, what I want people to take away is to put yourself in Stephen's situation and my situation and do better. Be better people. You know, God gave you these children, and you can protect them until you can't protect them anymore. But my biggest thing is the love of a mother.
Yeah.
Never goes away.
No.
So that would be a good thing to take away from this.
Absolutely. I love that. As more people around the world hear about Stephen's story through this series, what gives you hope that answers and justice is still possible?
I think it's going to reunite people's minds and what they know, and realize that it is worth coming out now. Even though it's 10 years later, any little thing you know, small, you might think it's small, but it could be a big lead.
To me, Sandy represents everything this podcast and series stands for. honoring victims, shining sunlight on corruption, and demanding justice no matter how powerful the opposition may be. Her love for Stephen and her determination to get answers embody the heart of this story. Next week, Murdaugh Death in the Family presents episode 6, and we are going to speak with Academy Award-winning actor Patricia Arquette about her role as Maggie Murdaugh and the emotional toll of portraying a complex character that enjoys moments of clarity, glimmers of self-actualizing hope, and ultimately meets a tragic death. We hope you're enjoying the original series, Murdaugh Death in the Family. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment or 5-star review to give our creators, cast, and crew the praise that they deserve. And don't miss Murdaugh Death in the Family, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.